Now we're going to play this exclusive, never-before-seen interview with Dr. Clenard Childress of blackgenocide.org on abortion and the globalist population reduction program, with particular focus on the attack on Black Americans.
Hello, my name is Reverend Clenard H. Childress, Jr. I'm the senior pastor here at the New Calvary Baptist Church in Montclair. And I've been here for roughly around 34 years now. And hopefully we'll continue to be an impacting force here in New Jersey and of course in our own hometown on the issues that I think that are affecting our community the most, and in particular the life issue which we have come to evolve into as being leaders. I became a senior pastor in 1989 and was a member of this church, which is very unusual, in 1974 as a young man. And things evolved to being a youth director and doing mentoring work with the young men in the neighborhood. I went on to be a chaplain, still considered a chaplain in the Essex County Juvenile Detention Center. And our broad spectrum of ministry looking to meet the need of the given society which we are in at this present time in this region caused us to attempt to get involved in just about every facet of an individual's life, and each having a different forte within the body of Christ here. We try to use our giftings and talents to further their needs, have their needs met, and also broaden our influence in this region. It's very difficult. We're a very conservative congregation, to say the least, in the terms that are afforded in this present day as what is conservative. I call it Christian. And we believe in the Bible. We believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic. We believe that it is crucial that this nation once again get back on that foundation if we're ever going to have any sanity. And hopefully we can continue to, in our efforts in social activism and just preaching the good news, and we can be faithful in that and hopefully be a part of that. So the important thing to the Baptist Church is, one, more members. Two, we take care of the existing problems and difficulties that we find within our congregation. And then it is traditional in the Black church to be involved in the community, not only in the social issues, but politically engaged. And through more or less just teaching our students about what we perceive here through our council of ethics, that they begin to be learned into things that would result in just good behavior and really being able to understand what the foundation of the faith is. And there's so many contrary views. And when I say contrary views, I mean it's just when they go to school, they're hearing another errant view on how to approach life. That much of the problems these children have is simply because they are not counseled and they're not more or less taught the truth about their own sexuality, about their own importance as individuals. So that's very much a heavy part of our ministry here. Getting involved on the issue was anyone would know that there's very high teenage pregnancy rates. Our young people are engaging in sex at the condoning of the public school system that's assisting them by handing out condoms and attempting to be their counsel and guide in their expression of their sexuality, which is circumventing the authority of the parents, which is wrong foundationally. And so we have this epidemic of STDs, epidemic of pregnancies, and an epidemic of promiscuity. And so sex was never designed to be one that was outside of the context of marriage. And so we're living in a society today that has challenged that principle, and we're reaping now what we have sown. So we're teaching our children the benefits of abstinence and the benefits of saving themselves for marriage. And of course, also letting them to know that abortion does kill a baby. that at 42 days there are brain waves, at 21 days there is a heartbeat. Even recently now they're saying at 18 days there's a heartbeat. And many of our young ladies and young men do not understand that that is life. We know that life begins at conception, and we have to understand that sex is a responsibility and is one that we're supposed to really maintenance and be good stewards over our body. Now, the disparity of abortions in the African American community was staggering. A young lady in our church, she was around 13 or 14 at the time. She's now married and has 2 children of her own. But she was coming home from high school, and one of the local crisis pregnancy workers, well, actually teachers, Chris Flaherty works for LifeNet here in Montclair, and she stopped one of our young ladies as she was going by the abortion clinic, thinking that she may be entertaining the thought of going in. And by intercepting her, she found that no, this was just her normal course home, but yet she had already known about the detriments of abortion, and that surprised Chris to the point that she was an African American, and she had an African American pastor who was teaching her about the ills of abortion. So that led to her coming here and asking me this question that I can still see now in my brain, my mind. Would you like to get involved in the pro-life movement? And of course, I used to get the 2 terms confused, pro-life, pro-choice. And I said to myself, sure, why not? I'll do anything to help, that type of thing. And since then, it just one thing just led to another. I was summoned to go down to Virginia Beach, where I was going to go to a LEARN conference, Life Education and Resource Network, the largest African-American pro-life entity in the country. And they were having a conference there, and I heard Akua Farrow in her presentation talk about the Negro Project and talk about Margaret Sanger and talk about the 1,000, at that time, 1,452 African American children that were killed each day by abortion. And needless to say, the targeting, the systemic way it was presented, the diabolical plan and the ideology was staggering. And I was shocked because here I am, a shepherd, and my goal and my charge is to protect the sheep and to guard them against the wolf. And here, this is going on right underneath my nose, so to speak, in our community, unabated. And no one was challenging the Planned Parenthoods, the abortion industry, and no one was challenging the African American leadership that was actually, I would find later, condoning not only abortion, but also benefiting from abortion. So that began the quest that we're on right now, and which led to us being major players in the pro-life movement. Well, Margaret Sanger was a devout racist, and that's what people need to know first. And her ideology was one, of course, that we are now finding out more and more today, that basically stemmed from Darwinism, that the survival of the fittest, and that a master race more or less should be bred, and that African Americans, Australians, and other ethnicities that they deemed were inferior needed to be either exterminated or their numbers reduced greatly. She was very profound woman, but yet jaded. And we find that she was relentless in her pursuit of this ideology being implemented in modern society. And so she birthed the Negro Project with the sole purpose of introducing sterilization and abortion to the African American community, and to do it in such a way that they would not be suspicious of her true master plan, and that was to sterilize and reduce the numbers of the community. And she also tutored some of the best, Adolf Hitler, She was a member of the Eugenics Society. She was more, Adolf Hitler commended her for her help in his initiation of his eugenics program, of course, in Europe. And so she has quite, impressive credentials when it comes to the ideology she espoused. And she had members of the Third Reich on her board. It was amazing that no one ever suspected or investigated this woman's background and associations earlier, even during that time. But it was unspoken, it was well censored, it's been the best kept secret in America, but right now it's really coming to light more so than ever before. She was brilliant in her strategy. She also perceived that if you're going to reach the African American, you have to do it from a religious persuasion. You would have to be cleared through the leadership of the church. And so she told Clarence Gamble, the heir of Procter & Gamble, that we ought to hire 3 or 4 colored ministers with engaging personalities and from social service backgrounds to make sure, more or less to be the face of it, to make sure that if anyone should suspect anything, that they would be able to quell any suspicions from the congregation or the people. And so, but that was very insightful insight, and that is how our community, even today, if you look at sociologically speaking, the most respected person in the African American community is still the preacher. Believe it or not, it's still the preacher. And second, the doctor. Third, the politician. She perceived that early and went out and began to commandeer clergy. As a matter of fact, they had contests where they awarded preachers who would give the best sermon to basically to facilitate this plan for the Negro Project, a eugenics sermon, so to speak. And they were awarded money, and but yet, unfortunately, it didn't really take root as she would like it to until, of course, 1973. Eugenics is the targeting of any ethnic group with the goal of either controlling the propagation or the fruitfulness of that group when it comes to birth, or exterminate that group. And the key thing is targeted, and also the key thing is that the goal is to reduce. Genocide is when you are already now in motion with your plan to reduce, and you're now beginning to have the effects that you desired. The numbers are decreasing. Numbers are decreasing. The birth rate is going down. In the African American community today, it's at 1.97. You need 2.1 in order to maintain the present population. Presently, because of abortion, we're at 1.97. We're already beneath the replacement level. And so then at that point, you can say, your plan is working. You've gone, you're awarded in the eugenics community with be able to say that your work is now a genocide. There's genocide going on in the African American community, and if with any cursory search at all, one would be able to truly find the culprit, and it's abortion. Well, I can say as far as the Planned Parenthood, they have a board of clergy. Recently in Portland, they opened up a mega killing station, and it was clergy present at the inauguration. Once again, this allows it to appear to be socially acceptable when you put a cleric in front with a collar and is talking about the good social good this is going to do for the community. And unfortunately, we're not looking beneath the surface. We have to understand that Planned Parenthood is very good at putting a very, very acceptable veneer on their true agenda. And you have to dig. but upon digging, you'll be horrified to know that they are only fulfilling an ideology that began with its inception, which is Margaret Sanger's eugenic plan to exterminate, to reduce, to create genocide with nationalities or ethnic groups that they felt were inferior. The key thing to understand is that this is what they believe. I used to believe that this was all about money. Now it is about money for many, but with the core group of eugenics believers and the brain trust of Planned Parenthood, it's ideology. How Planned Parenthood evolved, of course, you have to go with their founder, as we've stated already, unquestionably a devout racist, one who truly believed in the ideology that she was espousing. And she was part of a global group of elitists, the Eugenics Society, who had this same ideology. And she formed here in this country, it was first called the Birth Control League. And so we find that even then, it more or less somewhat reveals what the agenda is, and they began at that point to target the African American community, the Negro Project. Of course, at this time, as stated previously, they already had very strong ties with the Third Reich in Germany, and all the attention was on Germany. And of course, as that progressed, we saw the atrocities. You could see the mutilations of ethnic groups, and basically, which was focused on at that time by the media, it was the Jews, but through further research, we find it was also many African Americans. As a matter of fact, Hitler blamed the Jew for bringing African Americans into Europe, and because he was very much concerned about the pureness of the Aryan race. So as we know that World War II ended and many people were enlightened on Hitler's ways and means, and one of the things Hitler would do, he was very keen on phraseology also, just as Eugenics Society had taught its perpetrators to be feeble-minded, slowful, criminal. All these are words that society understood, and they were basically detrimental, and so you're not going to rush to the aid of the feeble-minded. And Hitler used one called useless eaters, and it was totally accepted by the German people, and he began his eugenics genocide, and it was first with the infirmed. They were not contributing to society, and so after desensitizing the society about their worth, he then realized he had reached to the point where he could continue and go forth with his plan. Of course, as you know, the world was aghast as the stench from the concentration camps and the stories began to pour out from soldiers who were liberating these camps. And so eugenics became a dirty word by the end of the war. And so Margaret Sanger was not deterred from her agenda. She realized she had to change the name from the Birth Control League to something that'd be more acceptable by society. And so therefore was birthed Planned Parenthood. And the ideology the same, the players still the same. The Eugenics Society still very much deeply involved. The only thing changed was the name, Planned Parenthood. So we find today that the Margaret Sanger Award is still being given. Hillary Clinton accepted that award just recently, and without an outcry from anyone. The Smithsonian called Margaret Sanger one of the top 100 women of the century. There's this deception and their willingness to still project her as a great woman and a great social agent for good and change, and it's just absurd. But Hopefully that will change now, but to think that that the Smithsonian would put her in the Hall of Fame and to still have the Margaret Sanger Award being given out. It's just like giving out the Ku Klux Klan Award. But even though their ideology and plan also was to pit the races against each other, you need a fall guy. And so the Klan, which unbeknownst to them was the fall guy, the true work of racism was being done once again behind the scenes. So where you have an outcry and outrage against the Klan and no outrage or outcry against Margaret Sanger, against the Margaret Sanger Award, against the Smithsonian honoring her, it's absurd, but it shows the depths of the deception and how deep it's gone. Back in '99, Reverend Dr. Johnny Hunter and myself got together and we gave a clarion call and said we're going to go down and lay 1,452 roses on the steps of the Supreme Court. Nobody answered that call. A few did come with us, Star Parker, Damon Owens, a few pastors who went part of the way with us, and I can't think of their names right now, but God bless them and I thank them for any participation. But that led me to know right then and there that there was going to be very much an uphill battle. And yet we did complete it. We laid 1,452 roses at the Supreme Court to bring attention to the number of African Americans killed each day by abortion. And since then, not at the rate, of course, I would like, but since then there has been a steady growth of pastors, leaders who are now began to commit themselves to carry this message. It's not an easy message to carry. Number one, you're going to be pitted against your own people. Number two, you're going to be pitted against the perceived facilitator of the civil rights movement, which is erroneous, but nevertheless, they got the perception across. That is the Democratic Party. So we vote Democratic. Well, that's the biggest problem. You should vote principle, not party. And so you're pitting yourself up against people who are well paid and been bought by the system to continually perpetuate this madness. And so, and if you're willing to understand that you're in that fight and what you're up against, well, then you can then continue along this route, or else you will get greatly frustrated because you will find that most people do not want to step out in that fashion against these perceived forces. You have the Congressional Black Caucus, basically has the same information I have, refuses to respond. You have the NAACP censoring resolutions that would want to discuss the decimation of the African American community and the health ramifications of abortion on their convention floor. Totally refusing. Wouldn't even read the resolutions. You have the National Action Committee, Al Sharpton, who refuses to touch the subject, says it's a woman's right to choose and it's her civil right, and leaves it at that. And of course, you know, Jesse Jackson, who was one of the greatest, profound pro-life speakers that I can't say heard, but read his speeches, and who flip-flopped completely on the issue simply for political power, for the money that would come from the sources that condone abortion and advocate abortion. And that's how we gleaned the name Black Genocide. It was from Jesse Jackson. Abortion is black genocide. What happens to a mind of a person, the moral fabric of a nation that can abort a baby without a pang of conscience? Where will we be 20 years from today? And I went down to help Trent Franks, who currently is under pressure, doing just what you just asked some people to do, step out. He stepped out and said 52% of all pregnancies, African American pregnancies, end in abortion. That's a fact. That's the truth. And people are calling him racist. People are calling him names and ridiculing him for making that comment. And so this is the absurdity of this. First of all, it's a fact. Second of all, it's the truth. Third, it comes from Alan Guttmacher, who sat on the board of Planned Parenthood, who happens to be very proud of that statistic because that's what they're getting paid to do, kill black babies, bottom line. And so if you want to know about how many black babies are being killed by abortion, you go to Alan Guttmacher. I wouldn't even go to this to the census. I wouldn't go because many states don't report. But most of the abortuaries, most of the clinics are some way connected to Planned Parenthood, and the Alan Guttmacher Institute is privy to that information. So, bottom line, people do not want to know the truth on this matter because they're going to have to make some changes if they acknowledge that this is going on. And especially, hopefully, his fellow black congressmen can have the same courage as Trent Franks has had in saying that this is an injustice. It has to stop. It's a health crisis in the African American community, and not one politician, African American, is really taking the necessary steps to make this a front burner discussion, and their whole goal is to keep it on the back burner or not on the burner at all. If you call a Caucasian person racist, he immediately gets totally frustrated and flustered. And so you even have in Atlanta, where they have billboards presently talking about the African American is an endangered species. And so what's the left's response? Okay, let's call them racist, and we'll put this type of pressure on them. First, you're telling the truth. And this is the biggest problem that I have always encouraged my fellow social activists who are Caucasian or any other ethnicity, that we are not to be intimidated by the common response they have used to back up opposition. You're racist. No, we're not racist. We are telling the truth. We are concerned about our race. I am concerned about my race. And I'm concerned that it is being victimized by the abortion industry. It's being targeted. And so the absurdity of it is simply so you do not have to answer the questions. You cast aspersions on people, which has worked. It has worked. And so, but that day, I believe, is coming to an end. Congressman Trent Franks, as I mentioned before, took that stand. There's others taking that. Mark Pence is taking that stand. And so I'm encouraged by this, and that they are not running away from the Congressional Black Caucus, calling them racist. I call the Congressional Black Caucus opportunists. I call them those who are right now practicing gross negligence. You are called to serve your community and be their defenders. You are to be guides. You are positioned so you can make decisions that would cause our community to grow and be safe. You have abysmally failed, and you are cowards for not addressing this issue. The ties presently, if you would go on Wall Street, you would find some of the most lucrative companies that have basically accumulated a lot of wealth quickly. They did so basically because of the slave trade. And yet it's those same entities you'll find, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Mellon, that have profited from the slave trade and amassed all this wealth, are now major players in the eugenics movement. In other words, the worth factor is now insignificant. It's not any advantage for them to have African Americans here. And before, I think it was Dick Gregory that said that during slavery, African Americans couldn't have babies fast enough. Then he said after slavery, there became a moratorium on having children. So this was the mindset, more or less. It was to no one's advantage. It wasn't to their advantage for them to see the African American population to grow. But yet these are, even today, very extremely wealthy businesses and entities, but yet if you do any of the research, you find that it was more or less accumulated during the time of slavery. In my experience, the greatest, pain, more or less, would have been of course, the Jim Crow laws. And there's others that possibly may be able to articulate this a little better than I, but each state began to become an entity within itself, especially in the South, and they created laws that were contrary to the federal laws that would have protected the rights of African Americans. And so there's still laws that were present to ensure the no upward mobility for African Americans. They were promised, was it 40 acres and a mule? Well, not if you were African American. So therefore land which was precious, and of course, most wealth begins with land, especially of that day. If you're not able to buy land, and if you did have land, there's a good chances it would be taken from you. You had great problems in accumulating wealth. So the Jim Crow laws, right after the Emancipation Proclamation, unquestionably challenged this nation to do what the Founding Fathers received the revelation to do in order to make it a great nation. Now, this would take about a half hour, but I'm going to try and do this in about 3 or 4 minutes. The pro-life movement is the only movement that demands this nation basically hold the key to its greatness, and no play on words. Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident. What truth do you hold to be self-evident? That all mankind was created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, can't take them away. Life, among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On traveling to Washington, D.C. to speak with the American Life League, I came to the understanding of why Dr. King said what he said in 1963, but also understood that there's only one movement today that could ever allow this nation to be the nation that God intended, because America never held that truth. But the Founding Fathers received revelation. Revelation never meets you where you're at. You're to ascend to the pinnacle of that revelation, like Moses receiving the law. Okay, we got the law now. Now we have to ascend. We have to move from where we're at and begin to embrace this law. The Founding Fathers, the major constructors of the Constitution, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson did not hold that truth. Washington did not hold that truth. God was saying, fellas, if you can get the nation to hold this truth and your laws reflect it, I'll make this the greatest nation ever on this planet. We've never held it. Even now, there were those, it's just like Abraham and Lot. Abraham says, is there 50 righteous? Is there 45? Is there 30? There were righteous men and women in this country that found it appalling, but not to the point where it would affect our laws, and our leaders would all represent what God had given these men to do. We hold this truth. Okay, 1865, Emancipation Proclamation, the greatest, most, I would say, the most painful war this country has ever fought was the Civil War. What was it over? We hold these truths. North said yes, South said no. Right after that, you went right into the Jim Crow laws, where 1963, Dr. King goes to the Lincoln Memorial and says, America has become a schizophrenic nation. Why? Simply because it says that we hold these truths to be self-evident. You had men fight on foreign shores for other people's rights, and when they got back home, they couldn't ride in the front of the bus. We never held the truth. And so now it's 1965. You have the first Civil Rights Amendment, which is another story I don't want to feel like getting into right now, but you have the amendment. Okay, we're going to begin to undo the Jim Crow laws. It's shortly right after that, you have, I think it's Denver in '68, come up with the first laws where you can actually mutilate and kill a child in the womb by law. It's either Colorado or New York that became the first states. Soon as it looks like you're getting ready to get it together to hold this truth, there's always a mutation of some sort of evil to represent, no, you don't hold this truth. And so 1973, I Roe versus Wade. And now it's federally, it's across the board. My point is this: the pro-life movement is the only movement in America that demands that this nation hold this truth. And when we do, we will be the place that Dr. King, I believe, saw in 1963, where Mississippi becomes an oasis of truth. And by the way, there's a personhood bill out of 31 personhood bills in the country right now, 31 states. There's only one state, I believe, that has the best chance passing: Mississippi. 1963, Dr. King said Mississippi will be an oasis of truth. At that time, Mississippi was burning. But Mississippi only has one abortion clinic in its whole state. Mississippi right now is the closest to recognizing the personhood of a child. In other words, Mississippi would be the first state we hold these truths. Dr. King said, oh, Mississippi will be an oasis of truth one day. He said the sons of former slaves will sit at the table, the sons of former slaveholders. He said that his daughter, his 4 little children would live in a world, would not be judged by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. I believe that this nation one day will achieve that, and that we'll all be able to boldly say one day, we've never had before, but one day we hold these truths. That was the one truth God said, if you hold this, I'll take care of the rest. We never held it. You know, your listeners ought to know that abortion is the most performed operation on a woman. If there's 12% African Americans in this country, and they're accounting for, I'm going to use this figure, this is extremely conservative, 37% of the abortions of the nation. Yeah, that's 37%. That means that African American women, you know, are having this operation performed on them more than any other woman. And to the point where that it is genocidal when it comes to the number of live births. Why did I say that? Well, up until 1973, breast cancer was not an issue with African American women. It was not a problem. Now it's epidemic. And Joel Brin, who's from this great state of New Jersey, more or less did 28 studies, 21 conclusive, that there is a link between a woman who has an abortion, especially a first-term pregnancy, and chooses to abort, will, over 500% in some studies, have basically will contract breast cancer. And there's a recent study in Turkey. They concluded 66% of women will contract breast cancer. Your chances increase 66%. And it's simply because when you miscarry, when a woman miscarries, the brain knows it and sends messages throughout the body, shut down. When you surgically do it, and you abort the child surgically, brain does not recognize that, and it continually sends signals, and what organ is affected by it the most is the breast of a woman. By the time it begins to shut down and realize there's no child, there's so many hormones and other things that are there, and they become cancerous later on. Now, African American women now lead the country in preterm deaths of their children because abortion is being sold to African American women as a contraceptive, which is unquestionably the most detrimental thing other than the death of the child, because you're now have created a situation with this woman that she's not able to carry full term when she wants a child. And so preterm deaths, once again, was not an issue in the African American community, and now they lead the country in that. Then there's a psychological problem with abortion, and I say psychological problem. It is this: the industry does not recognize, I'm talking about the medical industry, postpartum abortion syndrome. Now here a woman can miscarry and she can go through postpartum, but you're saying a woman that chooses to abort or may not choose to abort, coerced into abortion, will not go through postpartum? This is absurd to me, but that's presently the problem. There was a study done in Dayton. 85% of the women, 125 women did the study. 85% of them reported some type of psychological or physiological, but basically psychological malady. 55% were going through depression. Close to 60% were still crying. And no one wants to recognize this. And then here I am, the African American preacher, and if you know anything about the African American church, it is predominantly women. There are predominantly a number of women. In some cases, for every one man, there's 8 women in a church. For me to know these statistics and not think they're in my pew, and not think that they're not visiting my church in pain, hurting, suicidal, increased drug use because of trying to bury themselves in that pain, increased alcohol, trying to hide from the pain of something missing. And so the health ramifications, let's leave the pro-life, pro-choice, Republican, Democrat, Independent out of it for right now. How can you, NAACP, I'm really upset with them, how can you push Rainbow Coalition? How can you, Congressional Black Caucus, not have a forum where doctors, I don't need to come in. Everyone knows my position on the social activism part of this and the moral position on this. You need to talk to doctors who would validate what I'm saying and authenticate the data so you can now National Advancement Association of the Advancement of Colored People, so the colored people can advance in their knowledge of this. Right now, you are advocating the decline. You're the antithesis of your name. And so the NAACP really needs to be held in account. I'm very much encouraged at the fact that Julian Bond is no longer there, and that there will be another board president, and I'm hopefully that we can have some type of dialogue on this as a health issue. They're not supposed to be political anyway. So why are you making it political by not allowing this information to come forth? Is there any other reason why you would not allow this to come to the floor for discussion? So it is very, very frustrating to me that men and women can get up in the morning and censor information from other men and women that can make their lives better. It's very sad. Silent No More, Georgette Forney is a very good source to contact. Your listeners need to contact when it comes to the data. They stay on top of that data pretty much, and it's very, 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 very important that women get this information. And it's very important for leadership to get this information, but it'll stagger you, the things that are going on with women when it comes to abortion that media refuses to write about or address. Well, right now, as stated, I think that Alan Guttmacher, the Guttmacher Institute, is the most safest place to get most abortion statistics. We find that he is saying that there's 1,786 African American children each day killed by abortion. Just under 4,000. I think the average abortion costs around $450. As Alan Guttmacher that reported that 52% of all African American pregnancies end in abortion, and stated, we were trying to, as of course, follow the money. There were eugenics boards in states throughout this country. These states more or less practice sterilization. They practice, of course, giving out contraceptives, but punishing African Americans, minority children, minority women with sterilization, and also withholding benefits from them if they chose not to be sterilized. Coercion of this, unquestionably, even today, it's a little bit more subtle, but at that time, benefits were withheld. Benefits such as food stamps or food supplies. One victim talked about the cheese and the grain that they normally would have received, the grandmother would have received. They said, if you don't abort this child, we will hold back or take away your subsidies. And of course, at that time, especially for a grandmother, in this particular instance, that would have been totally unacceptable, or she would not have been able to see how to meet, her needs. And at that time, she allowed her daughter to be not only the child aborted, but the child sterilized. So it is unquestionably something of a ideology that has been prevalent, especially after slavery, and about controlling the numbers of minorities and African Americans. The last eugenics board, I believe, closed in 1981. I think it was Portland's. But to make a long story short, the government began to see the problems of being in the eugenics business in this nation. You had the Tuskegee incident. And so this was bad press. They began to say, it'd be better if we withdraw. And of course, the reason why they could withdraw, there was someone else who had already changed their name, and that was more than willing to continue the eugenics ideology, and that was Planned Parenthood. And to date, once again, if the taxpayer doesn't know it, $350 million last year went to Planned Parenthood from the government. And this goes through both administrations, Republican and Democrat. And so you find that Planned Parenthood, I believe, now is the number 2 or 3, became a mega institution from these resources being poured into them by the government. Why? The government got out of the business, and Planned Parenthood said, we'll do it for you. With all the outrage against Planned Parenthood, I was saying to my friends, with them accepting money to abort a black baby and to basically defrauding the United States government through their means of reporting of contraceptive sales, and then hiding statutory rape, more or less, to protect the perpetrator, so the girl would be satisfied and the young man or the man not getting in any trouble. And here Planned Parenthood on record hiding this. I said Planned Parenthood would shut today, but it'd be somebody else who would pick up that slack. And so, but the good part about it is that people are beginning to understand and to connect the dots and realize that this is being perpetrated against minorities, and it is deeply because not only, as I said, if abortion was not lucrative, it would not be legal, but there's still a very strong ideology and belief that when you can control the minority, the African American, especially in Africa, the NSSM policy of this country to make sure the numbers of African Americans do not grow, so they would not be able to control the resources. of Africa. That's validated, it's documented. We heard tapes of Nixon and others talking about this. It's sad, but nevertheless true. As a matter of fact, the study said there has never been a successful way. The only way that has ever worked in foreign land to reduce the numbers of a population, and that was to bring in abortion. And so you'll find that in any time that there is in any way, you know, you're talking about coercion. Okay, we're coming to your aid, Haiti. We're coming to your aid, Ghana, whoever. Whenever they come, you do not get the aid unless you take the birth control. You do not get the aid unless you accept our method of teaching you how you're going to express your sexuality. And if you don't accept the birth control, if you don't accept abortion, you don't get the aid. Now, believe it or not, that happened in Katrina, but can you imagine if there was a same type of catastrophe in England or in France, and the United States says, well, unless you accept our birth control, we're not going to give you any aid. So this is undoubtedly something that is, if they cannot be by deception, it is by coercion. And it is a means that is unquestionably being done today more stealthily, but when it comes to third world, it is coercion, and when it comes to this country, it is basically 85% of it is deception. One, leadership, African American leadership is disgracefully in bed with the abortion industry, and two, the censoring of information. You know, in the interest of choice. Choice implies you've given me the information so I can make it an informed choice. If you hold that information from me, you have an agenda that I would not make an informed choice, and therefore I'd be fitting into your plan. And so these choice advocates are hypocrites, because if it was about choice, they'd be sitting right here with me. You may not even agree with my position on it, but because you're an advocate for choice, you know that means anybody who would censor information would be wrong, because I'm going to use that information to make a choice. So with the African American community, it's been the censoring of this information and not allowing the truth about abortion to come to the forefront of discussion. The National Cancer Research, a defector, has admitted that they have hid the data of the link between abortion and breast cancer. This is something like this in a movie. I mean, you don't believe this stuff is going on, and yet it's factual. Amy Johnson, a CEO, one of the leaders of Planned Parenthood, she had her own clinic. I forgot her position, and actually saw the abortion through the sonogram and quit the next day. Out of conscience. She actually saw the child fight off the scalpel. And that to me, you know, is basically sums it up, what is going on and why we do what we do. It's a sad epitaph on right now on the legacy of this nation when it comes to this, and that's why it has to be turned around. But I had the privilege of meeting Amy in San Francisco, and to think that she saw this with her own visible eyes, unquestionably has probably left indelibly something that she could never be able to shake. I know I couldn't. Just saying it, you know, it gets me emotional, and but yet this is what's going on in America. Yeah, I learned from them. Matter of fact, the pro-life strategy, if you want to learn pro-life strategy from pro-lifers, forget it. Watch what they do. And that's how, you know, that's how I believe our message began. And that's why I had to be called blackgenocide.org. Please, you know, who gives a hoot about learn? but black genocide, what's he talking about? You know, and people go to the site. People go to the site. There's weeks I do over 200,000 people on that site. Well, right now, if you listen to our children, and I listen to children very intently, more or less the school itself is becoming its own God, its own interpreter of truth. And they have a great disdain for the Judeo-Christian ethic. They disdain any reference to Scripture or the Bible, isn't it? And it's so funny, you ask them to take out their money, and that in God we trust, it's still there, I believe, in most of it, even though there's a concerted effort to get it off. But the fact of the matter is that our children are with them 6 to 6.5 hours a day. And I tell the parents here in this congregation, understand that the system is designed to take the God out that you so desperately want in. And so it's up to us, either one, homeschool, two, if you can afford private school, but if you should choose to send your children to public school, you have to monitor your children and spend time with them. And I say, respect the teacher, but when it comes to these truths that we hold these truths, that we don't let anyone take those truths from us. So presently, the most successful schools in the inner city that have turned around the educational divide have been schools that have a degree of faith element to it, and where faith is not taboo, but used as a catalyst to get these children to learn. I went to Milwaukee School Choice, and it was just outstanding. These kids had devotions before they went to class. And when a poor child comes to school, you don't know what he's gone through or what she has gone through before she got to that classroom. You don't know what more or less what dangers that they have encountered even on the way to school. And sometimes those factors are not figured into the curriculum. But yet we're all spiritual people. When we can strengthen a child spiritually, they can overcome. Children are very resilient by nature, but we can fortify that by putting and encouraging the faith element. They can have a successful school year. And many of these children in the school choice program where there is a faith component are improving. And the sad thing about it is that that was the goal of the founding fathers. They said the Bible will be taught in our schools. The Congress made sure that the Indians and other settlers that came from other countries were given Bibles. It's interesting to note that in 1896, the Supreme Court declared we are a Christian nation, and nobody got bent out of shape. And the fact of the matter is that the Daniel Webster, the only case he ever lost in arguing before the Supreme Court was that a private school had to teach the Bible. And Congress said, no, a private school does not have to teach the Bible. Congress said a public school has to teach the Bible. A private school is allowed to do whatever they choose to do. Now, look at it today. There's more private schools teaching the Bible than the public schools, because the public schools have tossed it out. We have to really reflect back and say, we made some changes. We got off a road a while back. We're reaping the whirlwind from that, and we need to get back to those fundamental. We're the only nation that tries to accommodate everybody. It can't be done. We are a nation that was founded on these principles. Anyone who came here, except for African Americans, it was founded on those principles. Yet, when our rights were demanded, who were they? What was the catalyst? The church. So we were reconciled with, we hold these truths. We were reconciled with the faith, the Christianity faith. As a matter of fact, today, any sociological data shows that the church is still very much a part of the African American community, and they value it very highly. So I said all that to say that the nation was founded on those principles, and I think the present eroding of that foundation is the result of many of the problems and difficulties that we have. And either we're going to get back to that, or we're going to continue down this slippery slope of oblivion.
Remember, lovers of liberty, these video interviews have all been exclusive, and they're going to be archived at prisonplanet.tv. Please download them, burn them to disk, and give them to everyone you know. Upload them to YouTube. This information is vital not just to our free republic, but to the future of free humanity.